everybody, Mrs. Denham here. Hope you've had a really good weekend and you're ready for the week ahead. So today's maths lesson for year 3 and 4 is all on equivalent fractions. So before we get started with that, let's have a little warm-up. Are you ready?
Okay, so in today's warm-up, we're going to play a game called Beat the Teacher. So you guys are going to be against me. Now, I like to think of myself as being quite good with my times tables and my quick mental recall of maths facts. So let's see who's better, you guys or me? So I've asked my family to come up with some questions that we're going to answer, and they're on the next 10 screens. And what I want you to do is I want you to shout out the answer as quick as you can. We're going to see who's quickest. Okay, are you ready? Right, here we go. 5 times 2, 10. Who was quicker? Ready for the next one? 7 times 10, 70. 9 times 5, 45. Okay, who's winning so far? Is it me or is it you? 3 times 3, 9. 6 times 4, 24. Ready? 7 times 6, 42. 4 times 11, 44. I like the 11s, they're nice to remember, those ones. 9 times 8, 72. Do you all know the trick with your hands? If not, ask your parents, I bet they know it. 60 times 3, 180. Do you remember that trick of when we're multiplying by a multiple of 10? So 3 times 6 is 18, multiply that by 10 to give you 180. 12 times 100. 1,200. How'd you get on with that one? Today, we're going to be looking at fractions. So our learning intention for today is, can I recognise equivalent fractions? So let's start with a recap. What I'd like you to do to begin with is see if you can work out what fraction of each of the shapes has been shaded. So out of the stars, what fraction of the stars is purple? Did you guess that it's a third? 1 out of the 3. How about these circles? How much has been shaded out of how many? And that should give you a fraction. Did you guess 3/5? Okay, finally, let's have a look at the squares. How many squares? What fraction of this bar has been shaded? Did you guess 4/7? Hopefully. Right, let's move on. So continuing with our recap then, let's have a look at these two different fractions below. Now, some fractions that are written with different numbers have the same value. So in other words, a fraction can be written in many different ways, but they can have the same value. So down here you can see that half of this shape has been shaded. Over here, 2/4 of this shape has been shaded, but it's the same value. The same amount in both shapes has been shaded. So a half is equivalent to 2/4. So let's have a look at these equivalent fractions below. Now, these are all equivalent fractions, even though they all have different numerators and denominators. Numerators being the numbers on top, denominators being the numbers at the bottom. Now, they show that the same amount of the bar has been shaded overall. So you can see out of these 4 bars here, the same amount has been shaded purple. But in this top bar here, 1/4 has been shaded. The next bar, 2/8 has been shaded. The next bar, 3/12, and the final bar, 4/16 have been shaded. Now a quarter, 2/8, 3/12, and 4/16 are all equivalent. So I want you to have a go yourself. These 3 fractions below here are equivalent. They have the same value. But what fraction of each bar has been shaded? So pause the screen and have a go. Okay, did you get them right? Let's have a look. So a third of the top bar has been shaded, 2/6 of the middle bar, and 3/9 of the bottom bar. So these three fractions here are all equivalent. They all mean the same value. So I want you to have a little go yourself now, and you're going to need to pause the screen to be able to do this. Your first job is to write down what fraction of each of these shapes has been shaded. So once you've worked that out, you then need to find which fractions are equivalent. So some of these are the same as each other. There might be 2 of them the same, might be 3, might be 4. So pause the screen, write down all of the fractions, and then see if you can match them up. Okay, how did you get on? Let's have a look. So first of all, these are your fractions. Okay, so 3/6 of that first shape, 3/12, 2/6, and so on. So first of all, mark down whether you got the right fraction first. So let's see now whether you managed to match them up correctly. Okay, so 3/6 is the same as 2/4, 2/5 is the same as 4/10, and then we had two groups of 4 fractions that were equivalent. So 1/4 is the same as 2/8, is the same as 3/12, and is the same as 6/24. And then 1/3 is the same as 2/6, is the same as 3/9, and is the same as 6/18. So quite tricky, that activity, but hopefully you got on okay. So let's have a look now at how you can find equivalent fractions. So rather than just matching them, we're now going to have a look at finding our own equivalent fractions. Now, you need to be really secure with your multiplication and your division facts for finding equivalent fractions. So all those times your teachers have nagged at you about learning your times tables, this is where it comes in handy. And it's not just knowing your times tables, but it's knowing those division facts as well. And I'm going to prove my point now. So I can tell you that 2/4 is equivalent to 4/8. They are the same value, and I'll show you how I know that. Now, having a look at my two numerators, the 2 and the 4. Now I need to ask myself, what can I do to the 2 to make 4? And again, thinking back to my times tables and my division. Now, if I multiply 2 by 2, I get 4. Now, if I can do the same thing to the bottom numbers, the denominators, then they are equivalent. Now, 4 times 2 is also 8. So they are equivalent. 2 times 2 is 4. 4 times 2 is 8. Whatever I do to the top numbers, I must also do to the bottom numbers. Very, very important. So let's have a go how we would go about finding our own. Now this time you've been given a fraction that is missing a denominator, and it is equivalent to 6/10. So my first thing I'm going to do is work out what I would do to the 3 to make 6. And hopefully you've worked out that I would times that by 2. Now I'm going to use my knowledge of inverse operations, the opposite operation. If I'm going to times 3 by 2, I get 6. If I divide 6 by 2, I get 3. And that's what I mean by inverse. Okay, I'm doing the opposite operation. So to find my missing denominator here, I need to do the inverse. I need to divide 10 by 2. And that will give me my missing denominator. So hopefully you've all worked out now that if I divide 10 by 2, it will give me 5. Did you get that? I hope you did, because you're going to have a go yourself now. So using what I've just shown you about whatever you do to the top, you must do to the bottom, or whatever you do to the bottom, you must also do to the top. And using that knowledge of times tables and dividing, I want you to see if you can find the missing numerators and denominators here. So pause your video and have a go at these 12 questions here. Right, let's have a look at the answers. Let's see how you got on here. Okay, so a half is equivalent to 4/8. 6/10 is equivalent to 3/5. 3/4 is equivalent to 12/16. A half is equivalent to 5/10. 14/16 is equivalent to 7/8, and so on. Okay, so hopefully you got on well with today's recap on equivalent fractions. So keep working hard this week. Your teachers will be setting some work on fractions to help you practice, and I will see you again very soon. Take care.